Imagine this. You're sitting across from a woman, trying to figure out if she's the right one. You ask about her past, her exes, her childhood. She smiles, tells you what sounds like an honest story, but deep down, you feel it. Something's missing. Because she controls the story. She gives you the highlight reel, not the raw footage, and most men fall for it. That's why they get blindsided, used, or left holding the emotional bill. But here's the secret. You don't need to ask. You just need to know where to look. Because her past is written all over her, in her tone, her patterns, her triggers. Stay with me, because I'm about to give you 8 signs that expose her past, without you ever having to ask. So let's start with the very first one. Number 1, her relationship with attention. I want you to watch how she handles the spotlight, online and in the room. Not the outfit or the selfies, the engine underneath. There's a difference between a woman who enjoys attention and a woman who needs it to feel whole. One is playful. The other is a leak in the foundation that never stops dripping. You'll hear it in casual lines. My DMs are wild. Guys wouldn't leave me alone at the gym. Everyone was staring. If she brings male attention into the conversation unprompted and often, the story might not be about the men. It might be about the need behind the men. Here's the psychology in plain English. Validation feels like relief. If she was ignored in childhood or minimized in a past relationship, attention can become emotional morphine. And like any drug, the dose must increase. Your compliments hit hard at first, then they wear off. She'll unconsciously reach for a fresher source, new eyes, new likes, new, you're gorgeous. That's not villainy, it's conditioning. But if you build with someone who's conditioned to chase the next high, you'll be negotiating with a moving target. Let me make it real. David, 46, owns a small logistics company. Great shape, calm presence, generous. His girlfriend didn't just enjoy compliments. She reported them like weather updates. New barista flirting. Trainer too friendly. Random guy won't stop looking. David thought she was being open. But every update carried the same subtext. Am I still the center? When David got busy during quarter end, her mood dipped, posts spiked, captions grew thirstier. She wasn't cheating, she was dosing. By the time he noticed, he wasn't evaluating compatibility. He was competing with the crowd. Now don't jump to conclusions from a single weekend of selfies. Preference for attention is normal. Addiction to attention shows up as patterns. Look for compulsion, rapid posting when she's stressed, social energy that skyrockets after minor conflict, disproportionate irritation if you don't react quickly to her updates. Look for narrative inflation. Everyone was staring, repeated often, with a glow that outlasts the moment. And watch the why. Is the attention celebrated for admiration or used as proof of worth? Application, surgical and simple. First, stop overfeeding the loop. Give sincere, specific appreciation, then pause. If she's secure, she breathes. If she's hooked, she hunts. Second, test gently. Reduce your response time to neutral, not punitive. Observe whether she steadies or escalates by seeking fresh validation elsewhere. Third, cross-check with off-platform behavior. Does she light up more from shared experiences or from public visibility? If connection soothes her more than attention displays, you're likely in safe territory. Warning label, context matters. A spike in posting during a promotion, reunion, or after a tough week is not a diagnosis. Treat signals as hypotheses, not verdicts. Your job is not to police her. It's to recognize whether her fuel source aligns with your peace. Validation addiction is an emotional drug. If you're not the dealer, she'll find one. If you are the dealer, you'll never clock out. Number 2, how she talks about other women. If you really want to see a woman's past without asking a single thing, stop listening only to how she talks to you. Start listening to how she talks about other women. Because here's the raw truth. Women project. They reflect their insecurities, their scars, And their unresolved rivalries, not through direct confession, but through casual comments about their female friends, co-workers, or even strangers passing by. You've heard it before. A woman says, "She's fake," or "She's probably cheating on her boyfriend." At first you laugh it off as gossip. But if every woman she mentions is messy, trying too hard, or a drama queen, that's not just her being opinionated. That's a mirror. That's her emotional history leaking out. Here's why. When someone carries old wounds, they often see those wounds in others. A woman who was cheated on may constantly accuse others of being too flirty. A woman who felt left behind may tear down another woman's success because deep inside she feels she's losing the race of life. This isn't just catty talk, it's a psychological tell. You're not just hearing words, you're hearing what hurts. And men, you have to be sharp here. Don't get blinded by charm and smiles when she's with you. Pay attention to her tone when she talks about women she doesn't have to impress. Is it supportive, grounded, or is it laced with bitterness, sarcasm, judgment? Because tone tells you the truth long before the words ever do. Let me give you a picture. Imagine you're out to dinner and your date suddenly comments, "That woman across the room is desperate. Look at how she's dressed." Now, you might think she's just being playful. But a man who's emotionally literate pauses. He asks himself, why does she need to tear down a stranger she'll never meet? The answer usually isn't about the stranger, it's about her. That's her past talking, not her present. Here's the emotional punch. If every woman is a threat, you need to ask what past turned her life into a battlefield. Because no man wants to sign up for a relationship where paranoia, rivalry, and insecurity are running the show. And let me tell you, those scars don't magically vanish just because you treat her well. Now, I'm not telling you to judge her or dump her at the first sarcastic remark. I'm telling you to collect data. Test the pattern. Is it occasional or is it constant? Does she show respect for women who succeed, or does she always cut them down? Because the pattern is what reveals her emotional past and your potential future with her. Application. The next time she tells a story about a friend or coworker, don't just listen to the surface gossip. Tune in to the undertone. Supportive women are usually at peace with themselves. Bitter women are often still at war with their past and eventually with you. Number 3, her conflict style. If you really want to understand a woman's past, don't just watch her when things are going well. Watch her when things go wrong. Conflict is where the ghosts of her past show up uninvited. And I'm not talking about explosive screaming matches or dramatic breakdowns. I'm talking about the small friction points. Plans change, you forget something, she feels ignored for a moment. Her reaction in those micro moments tells you more than any love story ever will. Some women go silent. They shut down, withdraw, give you the cold shoulder. That silence isn't random, it's learned behavior. A woman who was punished or dismissed for showing emotions in the past often teaches herself that silence is safer than expression. Others go on the attack. Sharp words, blame, guilt trips. That's not her trying to win. That's her defense system. Somewhere in her past, vulnerability got her hurt, so she built armor made of aggression. Take Michael, for example. He's 55, divorced twice, a successful business owner who thought he had seen it all. But what broke his second marriage wasn't money, infidelity, or lifestyle. It was silence. His ex-wife would go stone cold every time a disagreement came up. A missed call, silent treatment, a canceled dinner, 3 days of withdrawal. At first, Michael thought it was just her way of cooling down. Years later, he realized it was her old wound replaying. The abandonment she felt as a child every time her father walked out of the house. She wasn't fighting him. She was fighting her past. But Michael was the one stuck in the crossfire. That's the core truth. Conflict isn't just about now. It's a replay of her old wars. You're not just arguing over dinner plans. You're watching how she learned to survive emotionally. And men often make the mistake of rushing in to fix it, thinking if they say the right words, she'll calm down. Wrong. Her reaction isn't about logic, it's about history. Here's your emotional punch. If every disagreement turns into either a Cold War or a battlefield, you're not in a fresh relationship. You're inside her unresolved trauma loop, and that's a dangerous place to live. Now, let's be clear. Not every shutdown means deep trauma, and not every sharp word means she's broken. Context matters. What you need to do is recognize patterns. Does she always avoid conflict, or can she engage calmly sometimes? Does she escalate minor issues into major ones, or is she capable of repair? Because those differences tell you whether she's replaying the past or writing a new chapter. Practical advice: don't rush to heal her or become her therapist. That's not your job. Your job is to observe, understand, and then decide, do I want to step into this war? Some battles aren't yours to fight, and the man who ignores that truth ends up drained, resentful, and wondering how he became collateral damage in someone else's story. Number 4. Her relationship timeline. You don't need to ask her, when was your last relationship? To know her history. In fact, when you ask that question, you usually get the polished version, the safe, edited highlight reel. But a woman's timeline is always leaking out in her language. The words she chooses, the details she skips, even the way she says "we" when talking about a restaurant or a trip, those are breadcrumbs, and they're far more honest than a direct answer ever will be. Here's the trick. Listen to how she places events in time. If she casually says, "That was 2 years ago," without thinking, she's giving you her internal clock. That slip tells you when something ended, how fresh the wound might still be, and how much distance she really has from it. On the other hand, if she avoids mentioning time altogether, never gives context, or skips past whole chapters of her life like they never happened, that's not random. That's a silence loaded with meaning. And silence, when it comes to someone's past, is sometimes the loudest confession. Think about it this way. People who have healed don't need to erase history. They can talk about an ex, a divorce, or even a painful breakup without flinching because they've already done the work. But when someone dances around timelines, when they blur the before and after, it often signals that the wound is still raw. It's like looking at a book with missing pages. You don't know what's written there, but you know it mattered enough to be ripped out. Here's the emotional punch. If she can't tell you when something ended, chances are it hasn't really ended. But don't fall into the trap of assuming one skipped detail means disaster. Context, again, is everything. Maybe she doesn't want to bore you with old stories. Maybe she values privacy. That's why you don't jump to conclusions. You stack signals. Combine the skipped timeline with her tone, her body language, and the way she talks about herself now. That's when the pattern becomes undeniable. So what should you do? Simple. Stop interrogating. Pay attention to the natural flow of her stories. When she says, "After everything fell apart, I had to rebuild myself," pause on that phrase. That's not just a casual comment. That's a marker of deep recovery. She may never spell out what everything was, but her words show you the weight of it. Practical advice: be patient. When you observe instead of press, she will reveal more than she ever intended. And your role isn't to pry. It's to notice. The way she skips over 6 months. The way she changes subject when talking about a certain year. The way she pauses when the word "we" slips out. Those tiny cracks are where the truth leaks through. Remember this. Women don't reveal their past by telling you. They reveal it by avoiding it. And the man sharp enough to catch that distinction is the one who never gets blindsided by a story he didn't sign up for. Number 5. Her views on men. One of the clearest windows into a woman's past is not how she talks about you, but how she talks about men in general. Because in those comments, you're not hearing about you. You're hearing about the men who came before you. And whether you realize it or not, those ghosts will sit between you and her if you don't pay attention. I've coached countless men who missed this sign because they assumed a woman's bitterness was just harmless venting. It's not harmless. Words carry history. Take Rick, a 50-year-old doctor I once worked with. He went on a first date with a woman who seemed charming, funny, and lighthearted. But every so often, she would slip in a line like, "Men are liars," or "Guys only want one thing," followed by a quick laugh. Rick ignored it, thinking she was joking. 6 months later, when the relationship blew up in a storm of accusations and suspicion, he realized those jokes were not jokes at all. They were scars speaking in disguise. Here's the truth. A joke that keeps repeating is rarely a joke. It's a wound wearing a smile. If she constantly paints men as cheaters, liars, or emotionally unavailable, that belief didn't come from a TED Talk. It came from her life. And while she may treat you well in the honeymoon stage, that underlying script is still running. When things get tough, that script can flip against you. Suddenly, you're guilty by association, paying for the crimes of men you've never met. The danger isn't that she dislikes her ex, that's normal. The danger is when all men are cast in the same role. That tells you her trust history is broken, and no matter what you do, she may still be waiting for you to prove her fears right. Now, don't confuse this with awareness. Some women can say, "Yes, I've been hurt before, but I know not every man is the same." That's different. That's growth. That's someone who has processed their pain. But when every story is coated with cynicism, when every reference to men drips with suspicion, you're not dealing with insight. You're dealing with residue. Practical advice: listen closely to her tone. Sarcasm with a sting, bitterness hiding behind humor, or generalizations about all men. These are red flags. And here's your responsibility. Don't argue with her. Don't defend men as a species. Simply observe and ask yourself, am I ready to carry the weight of her distrust? Or am I about to step into a battlefield that was never mine? Because remember, you're not here to repair her view of the entire male population. You're here to decide whether her history will poison your future. So the next time you hear her say, "Men are the worst," don't just laugh it off. Stop and recognize what's really happening. That's not a joke. That's memory in motion. And if you're not careful, that memory could rewrite your story too. Number 6, how she talks about her family. If you really want to understand the emotional blueprint a woman operates from, pay attention to how she talks about her family, especially her parents. You don't need to dig or interrogate. All you have to do is listen. Her tone, her choice of words, the way she dismisses or softens certain memories. Those are the fingerprints of her emotional operating system. Let me give you an example. Laura, a 42-year-old teacher, once told a man she was dating, "Yeah, my dad was around, I guess. We weren't super close, but whatever." That single word, whatever, was doing a lot of heavy lifting. On the surface, it sounded casual, but underneath, it was covering years of disappointment. That shrug was armor, not indifference. Family dynamics shape how she bonds with you far more than any ex-boyfriend ever did. If her father was emotionally distant, she may unconsciously expect men to withhold affection. If love was inconsistent, warm one day, cold the next, she may brace for unpredictability even when you're steady. And if she had to earn love at home, don't be surprised if she feels compelled to constantly prove herself in a relationship, even when you never asked her to. This is not about judgment, it's about awareness. Because what you're seeing isn't random, it's programming. Her childhood environment was her training ground for intimacy, trust, and conflict. And unless she has done the hard work of reprogramming, that old script is still running quietly in the background. Here's the punchline. Family dynamics whisper louder than love stories. A woman might tell you a glowing tale of her last relationship, but the way she flinches at the word family dinner, or the way her voice hardens when she mentions her mother, those are the tells that reveal how she really learned to love, to fight, and to forgive. Practical advice. Don't pry. Don't ask her to unpack her trauma like she's on your therapy couch. Simply notice. When you mention holidays, does she light up with nostalgia or shut down with sarcasm? When you ask about her mom, Does she offer warmth or a clipped sentence with no detail? Watch her body language. Sometimes the silence between her words is louder than anything she says. And here's your responsibility as a man. Recognize that you're not her father and you're not her therapist. Your role is to decide whether her foundation is compatible with the future you want to build, because people rarely outgrow the emotional language they were raised with. So if you want to know how she'll love you, pay attention to how she learned to love at home. That's the code most men ignore, and it's the one that costs them the most. Number 7. What makes her emotional and what doesn't? One of the most revealing windows into a woman's past is what stirs her emotions, and just as important, what leaves her cold. I'm not just talking about tears or obvious breakdowns. I'm talking about those subtle but powerful shifts, when something lands harder than expected or when she reacts with surprising detachment. For example, imagine you're watching a movie together. The plot takes a turn where a father abandons his child. She suddenly grows quiet, her body stiffens, her eyes avoid the screen. That's not just being sensitive. That's an emotional echo. It means that story touched a scar. On the other side of the spectrum, maybe she hears a song about heartbreak that would crush most people, and she skips it instantly, as if it doesn't exist. That isn't indifference. It's avoidance. Numbness learned the hard way. Here's the rule. Overreaction always has a history. People don't blow up, shut down, or detach without context. That intensity comes from something lived before. And detachment? That isn't strength, it's survival. It's what happens when someone had to harden themselves too early, when vulnerability once cost them too much. Sometimes the trigger isn't even tied to romance. Maybe she's excluded from a group outing, and the reaction is way bigger than the situation. Maybe someone raises their voice slightly, and she instantly shuts down. Those are not random quirks. They're emotional footprints, tracing back to wounds you didn't cause, but might have to live with if you stay blind. Your mistake would be to ask directly, "So, what makes you emotional?" That's the fast track to a polished, surface-level answer. Nobody reveals their real trigger points under interrogation. You'll get the edited highlight reel, not the raw data. The truth reveals itself when she's unguarded. That's why you observe, not interrogate. Practical advice. Take mental notes. What hits her hard? What doesn't? What scenes, words, or dynamics spark unexpected silence or disproportionate reactions? These are the keys to understanding whether she has faced her past, or if she's still dragging it like invisible luggage into your present. And here's the harsh reality. If she hasn't healed, those triggers will eventually get handed to you. You'll be the one paying the bill for the pain someone else caused. That doesn't make her bad. It makes her human. But your job is to decide whether you're willing and able to live with those scars playing out in your relationship. Because the past always leaks out in the present. The only question is, will you be wise enough to see it before it blindsides you? Number 8. Observation over interrogation. The smartest men don't play detective with a flashlight and a list of questions. They don't interrogate, they observe. And that difference changes everything. When you ask a woman directly, "So what happened in your last relationship?" you're inviting her to hand you the sanitized version. The curated highlight reel. Words are masks, they are armor, and she's had years to rehearse the safe answers. But her patterns? Those don't lie. James, a 60-year-old man getting back into the dating world after a divorce, learned this the hard way. At first, he thought being upfront meant asking every personal question on the table. Were you ever cheated on? How long was your last relationship? Are you still in touch with your ex? And every time he got neat, polite, carefully wrapped answers. But none of those answers prepared him for what came next. It wasn't until he stopped interrogating and started observing that he saw the truth. One night, he canceled a date last minute because of a work emergency. Her reaction? She went silent. Not annoyed, not disappointed, silent in a way that felt heavy. James noticed it wasn't about that one canceled dinner. It was about something deeper. That silence revealed an old wound, probably tied to being let down before. No question could have exposed that. Only observation did. Here's the lesson. Observation is emotional literacy. It's the skill of reading patterns, micro-reactions, tone shifts, body language, the pauses between words. Anyone can listen to stories. Few can read the silences. And let me give you a cold warning. A woman can rehearse a story, but she can't rehearse her instincts. She can't fake how her body flinches when something reminds her of abandonment. She can't fake how her voice hardens when a topic touches betrayal. Those are emotional fingerprints, and they don't lie. Practical advice? Stop chasing verbal answers. Instead, tune into what happens when she's relaxed, unguarded, or caught off guard. Watch how she talks about old memories. Pay attention to her reactions when plans change, when she receives praise, or when she faces conflict. That's where her past leaks through. And remember, being observant isn't about being cold or calculating. It's about protecting your peace. You're not here to dig for trauma like a therapist. You're here to recognize patterns so you know what you're stepping into. Clarity is power, and power is what keeps you from walking blind into someone else's unresolved storm. Words can deceive, patterns never lie. Which one are you going to trust? You don't need to dig. You don't need to ask 1,000 questions and hope she gives you the truth. A woman's past is never hidden. It's written in her habits, her tone, her silence, her reactions. It's written in the small moments most men overlook because they're too busy chasing the polished version of her story. Clarity is power, and the man who knows how to observe gains a kind of power most men never touch. Not power over her, but power over himself. The power to see things clearly, to stop wasting time on illusions, to step out of relationships built on lies and into connections that are grounded in reality. When you start observing instead of interrogating, you free yourself from the game of half-truths. You no longer buy into the highlight reel she shows the world. You start seeing the woman underneath, the one shaped by her history, her pain, her resilience, and her scars. And then you decide, do you want to join her journey or protect your peace and walk away? Either way, you're not blind anymore. This is your awakening call. Stop listening only to words. Start reading behavior. Stop being impressed by stories. Start being sharp enough to catch the patterns. A man who lives by this rule never gets blindsided, never gets trapped in someone else's damage loop. He knows what he's signing up for, and that makes him dangerous in the best way possible. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you're on a date, resist the urge to ask those cliché questions. Instead, pay attention. Notice her tone, her pauses, her triggers. Let her show you without even knowing she's showing you. That's how you protect your time, your energy, and your heart. If this video opened your eyes, even just one insight that hit you hard, I want you to drop a comment below and tell me, what hit hardest for you? Was it her words or her silence? I read every single one. And if you're the kind of man who refuses to live blind in dating, who wants to understand the deeper game, the psychology, the emotional layers, the truth most guys miss, then hit that subscribe button right now. Because in the next video, I'm breaking down the 5 types of emotional baggage you can spot in the first 10 minutes of meeting a woman and how to tell if she's healed or hiding. You're not going to want to miss that. Until then, keep your eyes open, your standards high, and your peace protected.